Welcome to the Grand Persian Empire, a land of opulence, power, and intrigue. At its heart stood King Xerxes, ruling from his splendid palace in Susa. But within these walls, a story of bravery and divine intervention was about to unfold, one that would change the fate of an entire people. This is the story of Queen Esther, the Jewish maiden who became a queen and risked her life to save her people. Esther was an orphan, raised by her kind and wise cousin, Mordecai. Though she lived in the Persian Empire, she was a Jew, one of the exiled people. Little did she know that her life was about to change forever. After Queen Vashti was removed for defying the king, Xerxes sought a new queen. The most beautiful women in the empire were brought to the palace for months of preparation before meeting the king. Among them was Esther, chosen for her beauty, grace, and virtue. Among all the women, Esther stood out. She won the king's heart, and he placed the royal crown upon her head, making her queen. But she kept her Jewish identity a secret, as Mordecai had advised her. Haman, a high-ranking official, was promoted by King Xerxes. He was arrogant and demanded that all people bow to him. But one man refused, Mordecai, Esther's cousin, who would bow only to God. Enraged, Haman devised a wicked plan. He convinced King Xerxes that the Jews were a threat and persuaded him to sign a decree ordering their destruction. The date was set. On the 13th day of Adar, every Jew in the empire would be killed. Mordecai was devastated. He sent a message to Queen Esther, urging her to speak to the king and plead for their people. But there was a problem. Anyone who approached the king uninvited could be executed, even the queen. Fearing for her life, Esther asked the Jews of Susa to fast and pray with her for 3 days. She knew the risk, but she also knew her purpose. With faith in God, she made her decision. She would go before the king. On the 3rd day, Esther courageously entered the throne room. The king saw her and, to her relief, extended his golden scepter, granting her permission to speak. She invited the king and Haman to a banquet. At the banquet, the king asked Esther what she desired. She requested a second banquet the next night, where she would make her plea. At the second banquet, Esther revealed Haman's plot. "If I have found favor in your sight, O king, spare my people," she pleaded. The king was enraged and ordered Haman to be executed on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. Though Haman was dead, the decree against the Jews still stood. So the king issued a new order, allowing the Jews to defend themselves. When the day arrived, they triumphed over their enemies, and the people of Persia respected them. The Jews were saved, and to this day they celebrate Purim, a festival of thanksgiving and joy. Esther's courage, faith, and wisdom changed history. She risked everything for her people and proved that one person's bravery can make all the difference.
The story of Queen Esther is more than a historical event, it carries powerful lessons for Christians today. Esther's faith, courage, and obedience show us how to trust God in uncertain times. Let's explore what we can learn from her journey. Lesson 1: God has a purpose for you. Esther was an ordinary girl, yet God placed her in a position of influence for a reason. As Christians, we must remember that God has a purpose for each of us, even if we don't see it yet. Lesson 2: Courage in the face of fear. When Esther learned that her people were in danger, she had 2 choices: stay silent or risk her life to speak up. With faith in God, she chose courage. In our own lives, we must also stand firm in our beliefs, even when it's difficult. Lesson 3: The power of prayer and fasting. Before approaching the king, Esther called for a 3-day fast. She knew that true strength comes from seeking God first. As Christians, prayer should always be our first response, not our last resort. Lesson 4: Obedience leads to blessings. Esther could have ignored Mordecai's advice, but she obeyed and trusted God's plan. Her obedience led to the salvation of an entire nation. When we follow God's direction, He blesses our steps. Lesson 5: God can use anyone for His glory. Esther was not a warrior or a prophet, yet God used her to save His people. This reminds us that no matter our background, God can use anyone for His divine purpose. Esther's story is a reminder that faith, courage, and obedience can change history. As Christians, we are called to trust God, stand for righteousness, and walk in his purpose. Perhaps, just like Esther, you were born for such a time as this.